Hello, I'm James Patterson, and in this video I'm going to show you how Photoshop filters work. I'll guide you through 10 filters every Photoshop user should know. So I have my images here in Bridge. We have a selection of images that we'll use to apply different filters to. So let's go ahead and double click on them while they're all selected to open them into Photoshop. And here we have the first image, our Gaussian before JPEG. Now you can apply filters by going to Filter and then choosing from one of the many options here. We have our filters split up into different categories here. But before we do that, we're going to convert our layer to a smart object. And this will allow us to apply our filters with far greater control. So let's right click on our layer here in the Layers panel and choose Convert to Smart Object. This is exactly the same as going to Filter and Convert for Smart Filters. Now let's apply our first filter. So let's go to Filter and we'll choose Blur, Gaussian Blur. This will give us a fantastic blur effect that is controllable using the slider here. Let's hit OK somewhere around 89 pixels. And you can see in my Layers panel here how my blur has come up as a smart filter beneath my layer. This means that I can double click on that Gaussian blur to bring me back to my Gaussian blur controls. It allows me to lessen the effect or tweak it in any way I like. And this Gaussian blur filter is really useful not only for blurring images, but also if you wanted to blur a mask or a quick mask, or if you wanted to soften skin. It's got many different uses, and I think it's probably one of Photoshop's most used filters. Moving on to our next image, we have this nice punchy black and white portrait here. Let's again right click on the layer in the Layers panel and choose Convert to Smart Object. And then this time let's go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. And this will bring up our noise dialog box where we get an authentic kind of grainy film effect by adding noise, maybe somewhere around about there. Let's hit OK to apply that. And again, if I wanted to make the effect stronger, I'd simply double click to re-enter my filter settings. And this filter works well not just for black and white images, but also for digital paintings or effects where sometimes they'll look too clean and crisp when they're created purely by a computer. So adding noise will kind of mess them up a little bit and add a little bit more depth to them. Moving on, we have a blank document here, and you can see I have red and black as my foreground and background colours. I'm just going to use the gradient tool set to radial gradient here, and just drag from the centre outwards to give us a nice circular gradient like that. And we're going to apply a filter above this, so let's create a new layer above it here in the Layers panel by clicking on the Create New Layer icon. Let's hit D to reset our colours to white and black, and then let's go to Filter, Render, Clouds. And you can see this has rendered my clouds on that layer. There's no need to change this layer to a smart object this time because the clouds just kind of comes up in one go like that. There's no settings to be altered. Now if I go to the Layers panel here and choose the Multiply Blend Mode from the layer drop down there, and you can see that's given me the beginnings of a really cool background with lots of depth to it, and I can use that to apply other effects on top. Our next filter is Lens Flare, so let's go ahead and right click on our background, choose Convert to Smart Object again, then let's go to Filter and Render, Lens Flare. And here you can see this brings up my lens flare dialog box. I can choose different types of flare and alter the brightness like this. Let's hit OK for that one. And this is where it really pays to be working with smart filters, because I can double click and fine tune the position of my lens flare, so I can change it to get it in the perfect place on my image. So let's try up here like that. There we go. Moving on, and our next filter is Lighting Effects. So let's right click again and choose Convert to Smart Object. Then let's go to Filter, Render, Lighting Effects. And you can choose different types of lighting effect from the Style drop down at the top of the box here. So let's choose, you can just scroll through with the mouse wheel to find one that works for you. I quite like this one here for a spotlight effect, and then you can click and drag these points here to make the effect larger or smaller. You can also adjust the intensity to by playing with the sliders here. So there's lots to play with in this filter. Moving on, we have motion blur next, and this is a great filter. It allows you to create a sense of movement in your images. So I'm going to use it very quickly here to show you how to create a panning effect. So this would be similar to if you're using a slightly longer exposure than normal and you kind of pan to the camera with the movement of the car. So the car will stay sharp and the background will get blurred. And you may have noticed in the layers panel here I have two layers. I have my background layer and a layer above where I've duplicated the background and isolated the car with a layer mask. Let's flip my background off and see how that's working. Now let's duplicate my background next, just by dragging it to the new layer icon. And then let's press Command or Control and click on the layer mask thumbnail here just to load that shape as a selection. Then with this layer active I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, and choose Content Aware. Let's hit OK. This will give me a very crude fill. If we just let that do its work. There we go. If I flick that top layer off, you can see that it's a very crude fill, but it's giving me enough of a fill to work with because I'm going to blur this layer now. So let's press Command or Control and D to deselect it. And then let's right click on the layer, choose Convert to Smart Object again. Then let's go to Filter, Blur, and Motion Blur. Let's hit OK to apply that. Distance around 90 I think would work well. And then let's flick our car back on, and there you go. You can see we've created this really quick panning effect. Next up we have a really fun filter called Polar Coordinates, and you can see I have a random pattern here. Let's just complete it by drawing another zigzag shape using the polygonal lasso tool here. Let's just hit Alt and Backspace to fill it with our foreground colour, which is black. Command and Control and D to deselect. Then let's go to Filter, and we'll go to Distort, Polar Coordinates. Let's choose Rectangular to Polar here in the options box, and then hit OK. Again, there's no need to use a smart object because it's a very simple filter. And there we go. There's our Polar Coordinates effect. If I just undo it a second, I'll show you how it's working. It's shrinking the top of the document into one single point and then wrapping the bottom of the document around it to give us that kind of result. Next up we have High Pass, and this is one of those filters that initially may seem a little bit confusing. You may wonder what uses it has, but it's actually a really useful filter that you can use both to sharpen things and to blur things. So let's go ahead and just duplicate our background layer there by dragging it to the new layer icon. Let's convert this to a smart object just by right clicking again. Then let's go to Filter, Other, High Pass. We'll use a radius of about 10 pixels and then hit OK to apply that. And then here's the important part. If we go to the blend mode options here and choose Overlay, this will give us that kind of effect where it's working really well to sharpen up parts of the image. We can then add a layer mask to our overlay high pass layer there, but if we hold Alt and click on the add layer mask icon, this will give us a full layer mask that hides everything on that high pass layer. We can then use the brush tool with white as our foreground color. Let's just use a soft edged brush, something like that one there. And let's just use the bracket keys, so right to make our brush larger, left to make it smaller, and then we're just going to whiz over the lashes there, and you can see on my layer mask here how that's working to really sharpen up those lashes. If I flick that top layer on or off, you can see how that's working. So you can see you can very quickly get some great selective sharpening effects. And it's worth mentioning that just as you can sharpen parts of the image, you can also blur other parts just by going through exactly the same process but inverting the layer. So let's just do it again quickly. Duplicate our background layer. Let's go to Filter and Other, High Pass. Hit OK. Let's change the blend mode to Overlay again. And this time let's press Command or Control and I to invert the colours on that second high pass layer, and you can see how that's giving me a blur effect. I can then again Alt click on the add layer mask icon to give me a full mask, and then use a brush tool with white to paint in that blur just like this, and you can see I can just blur all these areas of skin. So you can see how very quickly and easily you can get parts of your image blurred and other parts nice and sharp. Next up, we have the Pixel Bender plugin available for free on the Adobe Labs website, and this is where you need to go to get it at labs.adobe.com. And once you've downloaded the Pixel Bender plugin, so I've just saved it to my desktop, I'm just going to show you how to install it quickly. If you go to Start and go to your list of programs, and you'll have the Adobe Extension Manager CS5. Let's right click on that and choose Run as Administrator to open that as an administrator, and then you can go to File and Install Extension. So I've downloaded the plugin and I have it saved on my desktop just down the bottom here. Let's double click to open that, and that will install using the Adobe Extension Manager. Accept that, and there we go. Now if I open up Photoshop, and then our Pixel Bender plugin will appear under my list of filters down at the bottom here. Let's just go ahead and open up an image here. I have this nice holly, and then let's go to Filter, Pixel Bender Gallery, and you can see in my Pixel Bender Gallery here I have lots of different options here. I can load in other filters as well. There's plenty more to choose from on the website, and if you copy them into the Pixel Bender folder in your Adobe folder on your computer, then they'll appear in this list. So let's just choose oil paint for this one, and there you go. You can see how that's working to give me a really cool oil painting effect, and I can adjust these sliders. What's great about this as well is the size of the preview display here. It's really huge, so it gives you a great idea of how the filter's working. Let's hit OK to apply that, and there we go. And finally, last in my list of filters that every Photoshop user should know is the texturizer filter, which can be found in Filter Texturizer. But once again, let's just first of all right click and convert our layer to a smart object. Let's go to Filter Texture Texturizer. And this brings up my texturizer dialog box where I can choose from 4 different types of texture. So you can have brick or burlap, canvas or sandstone is my favorite, I think. This gives us this nice kind of grainy feel. And what's great about this filter as well is you can choose to change the direction of the light. So we can have the light coming in from the bottom left if we like. And this is great because you can mimic the light of the texture to match the lighting in an image. So you can add texture that looks kind of more realistic because it's lit in exactly the same way as your subject or whatever it is you have in your scene. So that's the end of my list of 10 filters. I hope you've enjoyed watching. And I'm not necessarily saying that these are the best ones out there. There's obviously lots of other filters to have a play around with. But I think these ones are used commonly, and I think it's important to know how they work. So I'll leave you to have a play around for yourselves. Thanks very much for watching.